Hello, friends, and welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Megan Colleen Johnson, and I'm here to guide us in raw conversations about thriving in life and work, so that together we can step into personal agency and stop letting life happen to us. We'll cover topics like health, boundaries, communication, finances, and worthiness. That badass business you've been dreaming of, it's not so far off. The desire to wake up feeling fully alive, it's right around the corner. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I am so excited for our episode today and for my guest today. But before I get ahead of myself, let me just share a little bit about where I'm recording and what I have in front of me, kind of set the stage of where I'm coming from today. So I'm in my office as per usual. And today I actually have in front of me a dandy root latte because it's evening. I'm recording in the evening, so it's starting to get dark outside. And I didn't want to drink coffee, but had that desire to drink coffee at the same time. I didn't want caffeine. So I opted for a dandy root latte, and it's actually pretty good. So that's kind of where I'm coming from today. And on the call with me today, I have Julie Parker, and we're going to be discussing and diving into the topic of reclaiming your spiritual self. So before we get started, let me just read a little bit about Julie Parker so you can be introduced to her and her work. Julie Parker is the founder of the Beautiful You Coaching Academy, where she passionately trains and supports heart-centered people to become life coaches. Julie is also the co-founder of Priestess Temple School, host of the top-ranking Priestess Podcast, the editor-in-chief of Inspired Coach magazine, and a published author and in-demand speaker. She is the recipient of numerous leadership and women's business awards and is committed to contributing to a world where qualities of intuition, presence, social justice, and service are honored. Along with that, I'm really excited because Julie has recently announced her book and shared her book cover. So she's going to be sharing a little bit about her book as well, which is Priestess, Ancient Spiritual Wisdom for Modern Sacred Women. So Julie, it is an incredible honor to have you with me today.
Oh, Megan, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
I love it. I am so excited to dive into our topic today. I think it's going to be so incredible and just really expansive as well. But before we dive into things, I'm curious if you could share a little bit about where you're recording from, kind of what you have in front of you, similar to setting the stage so people can picture kind of where we're both at.
Well, I am at the opposite end of the day to you. And in fact, it is mid-morning here where I am in Melbourne, Australia. And it is the beautiful season of what we call autumn, which you call fall. Mm-hmm. And so I can see in my window behind me, the leaves are gently falling from the tree, which is lovely, and it's a bright, sunny day. And directly in front of me here in my office, I have some rosewater spray, which I always give myself a little spritz of before beginning a podcast interview to just settle myself and clear things away. A beautifully lit candle, and the heater is on because it's quite fresh here this morning. It's one of those days that's very sunny outside, but it's quite cold. And so we're beginning the descent into winter at the moment at this time of recording, but I'm feeling very cozy and very lush and very privileged and honoured to be here with you.
Awesome. And I love that it's kind of funny. I think our seasons, while they're on opposite, so it's getting to be spring here, I feel like we're in that similar kind of cooler stage where it's still chilly outside, but it kind of looks like it might be nicer outside than it actually is.
Yes, exactly. I think that is the perfect way to describe today too, is that if you're standing directly in the path of the gorgeous sun, I think you'd be fine. If you're in the shade, you'd be calling for a scarf and a coat.
Yes. That's so funny. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and dive in a little bit. So I would love if you can share kind of what is your story? How did you start? And what did you have to really reclaim to step into the life and work that you love?
Gosh, this is such a big question, isn't it? That leads
on
a big life adventure. And I think there are many aspects to my life. But because we're talking today about reclaiming our spiritual self, I think that I might really focus on that aspect of things. We're all spiritual beings, Megan, and we have been spiritual beings since before we were born. We're all souls having a human experience. And so my journey begins from before birth and at birth, but of course we don't become conscious about what our needs are in relation to the life that we want to live and the person that we want to be until we're much older. And when I was growing up, I was raised in a traditional Christian religion. It was not something that was a huge part of our life, but at the same time, it was still definitely there. And I resonated with it somewhat, but really loved going to church more for hymns than anything else, the singing and the fun of Sunday school games and things like that. It was never really something that I felt deeply resonated in my heart. But as I got older and I began to explore a great deal more interestingly about feminism and the role of women in the world and my role as a woman in the world and leadership and equal rights and a variety of different things, it was actually really that opened up my heart and soul deeper to my spirituality and led me more into the work that I'm doing now as a coach trainer and also a priestess and space holder for other women. And that happened because I really realised that there were so many parts of my own womanhood and other women's as well that had been ridiculed and denied and shut down for so long. Skills and qualities such as our intuition, our capacity to nurture, our desire to go with the flow, our innate nature, which so often, sees us put people over profit and, rejects notions of hardcore capitalism and so much more. And it was really that ignited my path as a priestess, and it's something that I think I've only become aware of in the last couple of years, even though I've been priestessing for many, many more years than that. And that then led me down a path of ancestral reclaiming as well, and looking into the lineage of women that I've come from in particular, but also men, and realising that the women in my family had always been in spiritual and sacred service, as priestesses do, for a very, very long time. We have been teachers and healers and guides and leaders in our communities in various different ways. And it was really that then further opened me up to the fact that this has been a lineage that I've come from in some form or another, but we've just never thought about it that way, which is understandable given that so many of us are only reclaiming these things for ourselves now. And so that's what leads me to today, and I'm so grateful for all the twists and turns that have led me here.
Yeah, wow, I love hearing those bits and pieces, and I feel like it's such an amazing journey that you've actually gone into your lineage to study those different pieces, because it is that's like the reclamation journey at like the core of it, going into your roots, discovering where you came from and healing at that kind of root level so you can kind of show up in the world as an even more powerful priestess, which is really cool. I love that.
Absolutely. That is such a powerful part of this journey. And Megan, I do wish to mention that I feel very privileged that I have been able to research and explore that for myself back many, many, many generations. But I'm also very aware of the fact that not everybody has that privilege. They may not have access to those records. They may be adopted and not know their birth parents. They may not have access to older people in their families and to talk to and explore, whereas I feel very blessed that I have had that. I only just last year lost my grandmother at 98 years of age, and, feel very privileged to have been able to learn so very much from her and talk to her about life when she was a little girl and her mother and her grandmother and so many different things in that realm, which is such a gift that I know that not everybody is able to reclaim. in that way. And I just want to send the message to everyone that even if you can't do that, it does not mean that you don't come from something very deep and reverent and important. It's just something that you might not consciously be able to put names or faces or experiences to in the way that others can, but it's still there.
Absolutely. And I feel like you even kind of mentioned that with the intuition piece where you felt it and that's why you pursued deeper. And I feel like that kind of speaks to that as well, as even if those records are not available or those people are not available, the intuition is the core piece that needs to be followed more than anything else. And that's what set you on your journey, which is really incredible. That's so powerful.
Absolutely. And I think that that is the case for all of us, because do you know what? You just might never know what you will find, because sometimes when things are passed down to us as stories and what people think has occurred in the past, it's not always accurate. It's coming through the lens of other people. Now, for me, it turned out that my lineage was pretty accurate. My mother and grandmother said, we all come from England and Scotland and Ireland and Wales. That's where we come from. And they were 100% correct about that. The further we went back, there was some interesting areas in the Baltic region of Europe and Spain and other things, but that's the primary core reason. However, interestingly, when my husband did this for himself, which he was inspired to do through me, he found out that a very, very significant part of his ancestry actually comes from the Vikings and the Norse area of Finland, Scandinavia, and Denmark. Now, this came as a revelation to him and his family. They had no idea, absolutely no idea that this was the case, but this was what DNA testing and results came through. And so that was just so interesting for him to find. And therefore, I think that's why when it comes to reclaiming or understanding our own ancestral lineage and how that might be impacting our spiritual selves today, only you can do that for you. You can take on and listen to the stories that you're told, but they might not be fully accurate, and you have to do your own exploring, which I actually think is a really beautiful and exciting thing.
Yeah. It's all kind of part of the journey. That's so cool. I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about this already, but for my audience, and even for me, I'm new to this terminology of priestess and thinking about spirituality in a more fluid way. And I'm curious if you could actually define what a priestess is.
Well, Megan, if you were to ask this question of a number of different people, they may give you a different answer. It's like asking somebody who is a witch, or what is a witch, or any other sort of spiritual title in some way. People have different interpretations of these things. And I actually think it fits with the theme of your podcast so beautifully, because for any woman that may be called to this, it is about a reclaiming of this title and this way of being for herself. But to me, a priestess is a spiritual sacred leader at its heart. That's what a priestess is. It is somebody that is a sacred leader, is on a path of sacred leadership. And if you were to go one layer deeper with that, it is about somebody through that leadership that then holds space for other people, usually other women, to also open up to their own spiritual gifts and divinity. That's what priestesses do. Their primary role is to hold space and to inspire and encourage for those who are open to and desire to open up to their own knowing, their own healing, their own spiritual gifts and paths. And that's what priestesses do.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I feel like just hearing that definition is just like such a breath of fresh air when you kind of think of it through the lens. So I also grew up kind of conservative Christian, except it sounds like for me, I was a little bit more ingrained in it. It was a very core piece of my identity for a while. And to hear the empowered platform that a priestess kind of functions out of, it's so, I guess it's very empowering. So I love kind of hearing that. And I feel like that is just a huge piece of reclamation. It's also just noticing the stories and the structures that are perhaps not working and need to be just looked at differently so that we can step into leadership and step into our roles as a human that we're meant for.
Absolutely, without question, because Megan, once upon a time, priestesses in the ancient world were incredibly powerful and really revered and seen as sacred and honoured for the work that they did in their communities. And then we lost that significantly through the onset of patriarchy and lots of different systems of oppression that went alongside that, including capitalism and colonialism, white supremacy, and so much more. And it's really only been in recent times that women have begun to reclaim this title and this path for themselves. It's not new. It's very, very ancient, and we're just reclaiming it for ourselves now. And I think many women are opening up to the thought and feeling and process that, yes, this may be me. And I can see this spiritual aspect to my work and how I want to show up in the world. And I'm claiming that. And so it's a beautiful thing, because the more women do that, I feel, the more that we're going to collectively heal. The more we individually heal, the more we know that we collectively heal. And that's only going to be a powerful thing for us all as humanity, all of us.
Yes, absolutely. And that was kind of answering my next question, which was, what importance do you see reclaiming spirituality having in our modern world? And do you have any kind of additional thoughts to that question, or do you feel like that kind of encompassed any thoughts you have around that?
Well, the first thing that I want to say in relation to this, because it is so deeply linked to that beautiful word of reclaim or reclaiming, is that we are all spiritual beings. And in many ways, there is in fact nothing to reclaim here. We've already got it. It's inherent within us. It's all just about how much are we going to be open to it. And how much are we going to be prepared, or how much do we want it to be part of our life? Because we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. But for some of us, that's going to be a deeper calling than others. And I think the reclamation part, especially for women, Megan, really comes in very strongly when it comes to those parts about reclaiming our spirituality, where, as I was mentioning before, aspects of that for us have been denied and they've been pushed aside and even ridiculed. Because to me, I'll give you an example. One of the core parts of reclaiming or honouring our spirituality, however you'd like to see it, is developing a deep trust and connection with our intuition. I don't think that you would find any woman alive today who described herself as a deeply spiritual being that would not be able to speak very lovingly and powerfully to her relationship with her intuition.
Yeah.
That part of herself that is her inner knowing, her inner guidance, her compass, her soul voice. It's a deep, deep part of that. But of course, in many circumstances, we think back to 1950s housewives. For some of us who are a little bit older like me, that would be our mum's time or our grandmother's time, or maybe even great-grandmother's time, where things such as a woman's intuition was ridiculed. If a woman stepped forward and said, I don't get a good feeling about that, or I don't think we should do that, but all evidence otherwise presented a path forward that said, oh, no, we should, or the figures said we should, or it was written in black and white somewhere that said, no, this is best. That was what was deferred to constantly, and in many instances still is today. But now there are so many women through reclaiming their spirituality that are understanding that intuitively that relationship for themselves is extraordinarily powerful and necessary, and they're turning to it and tuning into it and reclaiming it more and more and at deeper and deeper levels for their own benefit and for the benefit of, I believe, everybody around them as well. This is where we make decisions that might seem on the surface to be a little bit left of field, but in fact turn out to be right. You know, when we make a decision that seems like all paths point in one direction, but we go in another, or we challenge the status quo and instead of doing what everybody else is doing, we do what we want to do, and that opens up a whole new pathway for us. And so I think, that's just one example of how the reclamation and honouring of our spirituality and intuitive self is deeply important right now, but to also send the message to everyone that it's already with you and you don't even necessarily have to reclaim it. It's just there. It's there for you if you're prepared to develop that relationship.
Yeah. I feel like that brings to mind something that I feel like is a really core piece of the work that I do, is just this remembrance that we're a whole person, a whole being, where it's not the mind being separate from the body, and it's kind of integrating the spiritual piece as well. So we've got our mind and our body and then this spiritual intuition piece, and it's integrating that all together and allowing all of that to be part of our human experience and to be welcome and to, really listen to the intuition that's there, listen to that spiritual self when it's speaking up. And I know for myself and for the clients that I've started working with, it has been really interesting because there is still this need to tap back into the intuition, to tap back into that spiritual self. While we've come a long way, there is still stigma around it, especially in the workplace and in business. Traditional kind of business structures anyways, it's often still discounted if you say, I just don't feel like that's the right choice. I just don't, I feel like we need to go with plan B instead of plan A, things like that. It's such a relief when that intuition has the opportunity to actually speak up and it's allowed and it can be present, especially coming from those other structures. But I'm curious then, for people who have need to pick this back up, what empowering tips or structures do you have that might be able to support that journey?
Well, this is probably going to sound very simple, Megan, but the first thing that I think is very powerful and helpful when it comes to our intuition as a human being is to see it as another form of a relationship in our lives. So it's, we know that for a relationship with other people around us to be strong and flourishing and serve us, that we need to commit to that relationship, whether it be with an intimate partner, a friend, a work colleague, in varying different ways. We need to commit to it in some form. We need to give that relationship time. We need to nurture it. We need to communicate with the other person in that relationship. And I see our intuition in exactly the same way. If you want your intuition to get stronger, to really serve you, and to be a guiding light in your life, you have to commit to that relationship. You have to nurture it. You have to give time to it. You have to be open to it, because if it's one thing that's going to shut your intuition down very, very quickly, it's when you do hear it and you ignore it.
Yeah.
Just like a person in real life. If you ignore someone enough times in your life, eventually that relationship will end.
Yeah.
Because no relationship can flourish where one person is being ignored, or it's being pushed down, or it's being ridiculed. And it's exactly the same with your intuition as well. And so if you see it as a relationship, and you think to yourself, okay, how do I commit to this and how do I find ways to nurture it? And I think the portal to that, Megan, truly is just about giving it time, which means giving you time. Even if you were to begin simply by doing this, which is finding a comfy chair in your home, somewhere where you can sit, even for 5 minutes a day, only 5 to start with, especially if you find that sort of stillness challenging. Just for 5 minutes every day, and you sit in that chair as distraction-free as you can. You can close your eyes if you want, or you don't have to. You don't need to drop into meditation if you don't want to, but you can if you choose to. And you simply ask yourself the question, what would you have me know?
That's such a powerful question.
Exactly. And see what comes forth. See what comes through. Now, you're going to hear some ego. You might hear some stuff around, well, I don't know. At which time you just keep breathing and you go, what would you have me know? Because there will be something at a deeper level. And you just feel into it. And eventually what will begin to happen, it might not happen at the first time or the second time or even the third time, but eventually you will start to hear words and messages. You may even see some things in your mind's eye that will come to you that will be guidance of some way, of some kind or something or some way. Just like someone can ask us a question, and you would know this, of course, as a coach, and we can think in our heads, oh, I don't know the answer to that, and then all of a sudden it drops in instantly. And we're like, oh, I did know the answer to that. There it is. And that's your gut. That's your intuition. That's your heart and soul speaking, because it just came through so fast. And to remember as well that your soul and intuition, while it might not necessarily tell you something that makes full sense to you or even be what you want to hear or you expect to hear, it will never berate you. It will never feel bad. It may feel confusing, a bit discombobulating, a bit unsure, and that's okay. It's just testing you and challenging you and stretching you. But unlike our ego, which can sometimes be very fierce and challenging, it will never, ever make you feel bad. And so if you're trying, what's the difference between the two? That's the difference. It's like, how much can you feel into what it feels like, knowing that even if it's telling you some things that you're not quite sure about, that if it doesn't feel bad, then there's something in it for you.
Yeah, I had someone explain it to me previously in that it feels expansive. And I just love that word, because I feel like that almost just, creates a lightness kind of in your chest, and you're just like, oh, that feels good. Like, oh, that's interesting. Like, you may not understand it, like you're saying, but it just kind of feels expansive instead of all of the other things that, the world may throw at us. Our intuition always feels expansive.
I love that. And I would completely agree.
That is such a beautiful tip. I love the whole exercise of just kind of sitting and asking those good questions. So that's really beautiful. I'm curious as well for individuals who are kind of stepping into this idea of being a spiritual being. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit more? Because I know for many of us, it can be interesting to think of ourselves as spiritual beings, just with different belief systems in the world. Some people are approaching this from a different perspective. So I'm curious, for someone who is actually coming to this from perhaps I am a spiritual being, what do you have for them that might be able to support them on that part of their journey?
Oh my gosh, that is a really big question. When we think about, you're right, all of the spiritual and even religious influences that may impact somebody's journey in this way. And the thing that's coming to me, Megan, is just to share with everyone that might be in the beginning stages of a journey of this kind is to understand that your spirituality really is just your connection to your highest self. It is your connection to your most divine, soulful, whole, healed self, and how you can come back to that and move beyond things such as fear, feeling or acting and being small when you are not. You are a light of God, the goddess, the universe. How you can best be in service in the world, how you can live your truth, how you can walk through every day feeling aligned and on purpose. Now, those are very, very big things that essentially to me, they are what someone's spirituality and spiritual expression in the world is. And we go about that in small steps and small ways. So, for example, for me, when I first started out on this journey, one of the things that really came through very strongly for me with my intuition, when I started to open up and feel more that I was stepping into a role as a priestess, and I started to connect deeper with the world of the goddess and other things, I got sent this very, very clear message that I needed to do something, for want of a better expression, about the fact that I did not have a very good relationship with my body. That, in fact, my ego was very negative in my head about my body image and how I felt about the way that I looked, and that was influencing how I showed up in the world. Now, nobody was more surprised about me than me. And it just kept coming back to me over and over again. And I'm like, what in heaven's name does this have to do with my spirituality? Like, come on now, this seems ridiculous. But what it was, which is what it may be for any of you that begin exploring this path for yourself, was that was the primary thing that was showing itself to me at that stage that needed healing. And I needed to stop obsessing so much about how I looked, to get off the dieting merry-go-round, to stop doing many things that were punishing towards myself, and start to really open up to how I could develop a more positive, embracing and loving relationship with my physical being. And I was to learn that, which I now gratefully have, and I've worked hard at it and I'm so pleased about. But what that did was it helped me to see that until I began to step onto a healing path with that for myself, that I could not expect to be the wonderful space holder that I wanted to be for other women in particular until I did.
Yeah.
That until I addressed these things within myself, that I wasn't going to be able to be that for others. And that's often what our spiritual path will show to us. And that's where, we have to look into our shadow, and we might experience what they call a dark night of the soul, where things might feel and get worse before they might feel and look and be better. And that's all okay, and it's all a part of it, and that we're constantly all on a healing path around different things. I certainly have been and continue to be all the time. And that doesn't mean that we have to strive to keep being better and better and better all the time. We're all whole, but also all still healing too. And recognising the dichotomy and the beauty between the two of those things is very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the turning inward to heal. And I feel like this has been coming to mind so much for me with everything that has gone on in the world recently. With the world seems to be mirroring to us this request to go home, to turn inward, to heal ourselves, to listen to our intuition, to lean in and to take care of ourselves so that we can heal the collective. And I think that that's such a a powerful thing to notice about what's happening right now and what's happening in this season. And I love that kind of example as well. It's just like, it's not that we're whole, we are whole. And it's just kind of a putting the pieces together. One of my other recent podcasts, we talked about it as fragmentation, where our pieces are all there. It's just putting them back in place into where they belong. Right. So that way we can show up as our full and best selves. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that example.
You're so welcome.
Awesome. Well, is there anything that you feel that surrounding this you want to address or speak to at all? Anything that you're feeling needs to be addressed or that you want to speak to kind of before we move into some kind of wrap-up questions?
Oh, I think I would just like to say to everyone that there is just such a beautiful light inside you that is there for all of us, and that I just want to wish everyone the very best with reclaiming that and opening it up for themselves in whatever way that's meant to look like. It can be messy, it can be challenging, it can be difficult at times, but it can also be joyous and beautiful and wonderful. And I don't think that there's anything more powerful that someone can do with their life than to step onto that path of healing and wholeness at once.
Yeah, it usually is a mix of all of those things, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And that's what makes it so topsy-turvy, but also so wonderful as well.
Yes. It's worth it for sure. So I'm curious, what is one way you slow down amidst our busy world? Right now, many of us are having to do that, but in kind of the normal day today, what is one way that you slow down amidst our busy world?
I sit, but not in front of a computer. I sit in a chair, and I might be lucky enough to have a cat jump in my lap, and that slows me down and pins me down even further. Or I may sit in front of my altar at home, or I may sit on the grass and ground outside. I sit anywhere that there is not a computer or a phone that is then going to take me out of the joy of sitting and slowing down.
Yeah. That's good. I love the screens part of that. It can be tempting to slow down with a phone or with, a screen that we're used to, but to focus in and to allow space, even for just what we were talking about earlier, for our intuition, taking a step away from that is such a beautiful thing. I love that.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, who are a couple of your current role models or colleagues that you find encouragement from?
Well, you know what, Megan, I feel incredibly blessed in my life that I am so deeply loved and surrounded by many, many people that encourage me. And while it would be remiss of me not to give a nod to my loving husband, who is my greatest, dearest love and friend and cheerleader in life, in truth, when I think about this path in my life, it's the women around me that have been my biggest encouragers and supporters. And they come through, especially in my team, in my work, and just simply my dearest and nearest friends who know how passionate I am about being in service to others, and they're just constantly there to support me. And I just feel very, very blessed that I've always had that. And it's an honour for me to return that encouragement to them too.
That's beautiful. I love it. I'm curious kind of with that. I know because I follow you on Instagram that you, while you are training coaches regularly, including myself, you also are constantly and consistently being coached. And I'm curious, would you be willing to share any of the people that you have been coached by or are currently coaching you?
Well, not actually. No, I am. I'm working with a coach in a group program at the moment, and her name is Hayley Carr. Hayley and I have known one another for many years, and she has a particular passion for leadership, and I'm learning an enormous amount from her, and that's a wonderful experience that goes for a good portion of 2020. In the past, I have also been coached by the amazing High Priestess Laren Alter, who is an incredible business coach, spiritual maven, so many wonderful things that I have learned from Leren in the past. From a business perspective, I've been coached by the wonderful Selena Sue, who's based in New York City. I worked with Selena a number of years ago around polishing my connections with media and PR and how to engage with them. She was absolutely fantastic. That was extraordinary. I've also worked with the wonderful life and spiritual coach and breathwork facilitator, Hella Weston. Hella is actually someone that I trained to become a coach, and I don't see any difference between myself as a teacher and other people. We all have different things to learn from each other, and I knew that there was something very special about Hella when she trained with us many, many years ago. And I only worked with her very recently last year when I was going through an experience where I felt like I needed some very strong energetic and spiritual holding while a lot of things were swirling and confusing around me. And I was just guided that Hella was the right person for me, even though, in inverted commas, she was a lot younger than I was, had a lot less coaching experience than me, and a whole lot of other things. I just knew my intuition, my soul voice told me that she was the right person to hold space and coach me during that time, and she absolutely was. And so there's just a few to share with you, all incredible in their own right.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing those. I feel like that is something that I do just find so beautiful about leaders and the priestesses that I've come to follow. It's this kind of ongoing learning journey as well, where it's turning inward and it's also learning from others. And I just really appreciate that about you, and kind of what I've seen following you is how you're in some capacity you're always like shifting and growing and leaning into these different things. And I just really appreciate that. So thank you for sharing some of those, just as like a note for everyone who's listening, so that they can see as well that we're all journeying and learning together. And I love that.
You're so welcome. So welcome.
Last, but definitely not least, I would love to provide you some time and space to share how can we find and support you online. And if you want to share a little bit about your book, I would love to hear about it.
Oh, thank you very much, Megan. I am so deeply proud of this book. She's simply called Priestess, Ancient Spiritual Wisdom for Modern Sacred Women. And she's out this year. And it's a journey that shares with everyone about the ancient wisdom of women leaders of the past, and how their magic and spiritual practices can really ignite us today for guides and coaches, teachers, mystics, healers, to really, really turn within, as you and I have been talking about today, and heal, and then inspire themselves to step out into the world as the leaders that they are. And it really encourages the reader to go on a deep healing path, and how they might be able to do things like connecting with their beautiful cyclic nature, the goddess, Mother Earth, sisterhood, and so many other things. And I'm so proud of her, and feel deeply honoured that I was called to write it, and just really feel like it's a piece of my heart out in the world. And so looking forward to her touching as many lives as she possibly can in who she's meant to land with, because I know that whomever it is that she's meant to be with, she will be. It's one of those books, I think, that if it's meant to find its way into your hands, it will.
That's amazing. I love it. I can't wait to read it myself. I think it's going to be really eye-opening for me in a lot of ways on my own journey. So I'm really excited about it. And I just, absolutely. And thank you for all the time you spent putting into it. I can only imagine what goes into writing a book. So I'm sure, like you said, it's a part of your heart. So
yeah. Absolutely, it is. It certainly is. And thank you so much for having me on the show, Megan, and for all of your beautiful work in the world too. It's like we need more people reclaiming all parts of themselves right now. It's so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so, so much. And then for everybody who's listening, you can absolutely connect with Julie via her website, and I'll have links in the episode notes. Just thank you so much for being here with me today, Julie.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Reclamation Podcast. I hope it served you on your own reclamation journey, and know that I'm rooting for you all the way. If you want to learn more about the show guests, head to the website, thereclamationpodcast.com. And if you found value in the show, 5 stars is always appreciated. Good things are coming for you. Bye for now.